Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tip. My name is Julian, and in this episode we're talking about the St. Louis Blues, continuing that series of episodes that we've been making, talking about each individual NHL team, talking about their lines, their noteworthy players, and whether I think you should consider drafting some of their noteworthy players. If I seem a little bit tired, it's probably because I am. It's the 5th episode I record today, but I'm going to keep going, enjoying myself, and we're going to jump right into it. But before we do, please leave a like, hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell. If you do want to take your support to the next level, you can follow me on Patreon. The link is in the description below. Let's jump into the St. Louis Blues lines now that I'm projecting for next year. On the top line, same as last year, Pavel Buchnevich, Robert Thomas, and Vladimir Tarasenko. Tarasenko might get traded at some point this year, but as of right now, he's still a St. Louis Blue, and that's going to be a very strong line. Second line, Brayden Saad, Ryan O'Reilly, and Jordan Kyrou. And on the third line, Ivan Barbashev, Brayden Schenn, and Logan Brown. First on the list is Vladimir Tarasenko, and last year was finally able to stay healthy, was firing on all cylinders, managed to score 82 points in 75 games, so those injuries are behind him finally, and he's good to go, guys. That's a really good point total, and I'm expecting something similar from him next year. He shoots the puck a lot too, which gives him a pretty safe floor night in and out as well. Definitely like Tarasenko, have him ranked in my top 50 players, and he's currently going outside the top 50 in terms of ADP, so I like him there. Then I have Pavel Buchnevich, who I also have ranked in my top 50 players, but is going on an ADP of almost 7. He scored 76 points in 73 games last year, over a point per game. Also shoots the puck a nice amount, and he's going to be playing with Tarasenko, so I think he's going to have himself another really solid season. Then I have Jordan Kyrou. I see him playing on the line with Ryan O'Reilly, as you saw in the lines. 75 points in 74 games. He doesn't shoot the puck as much, though, so that's why he has a little bit less of a floor, which is why I have him ranked a little bit lower. He's still in my top 100 players, though, and I think at this ADP, he's not too bad like Jordan Kyrou for fantasy this year. Next on the list is Torey Krug, who scored 43 points in 64 games last year and finished as the 132nd best player in terms of fantasy points per game. It's not bad, but obviously this ADP is a little bit high. I'm expecting him to have a little bit of a better season, though. But honestly, even if he doesn't, Torey Krug is a super safe pick, and he managed a top power play on a pretty good team. So even if he doesn't necessarily hit this ADP, you know that you're making a very safe pick and getting yourself a pretty solid defenseman on your team. Brayden Schenn, on the other hand, while I like Brayden Schenn as a player a lot, those 58 points in 62 games are nowhere near sustainable. He shot at 21.6%, which is insanely high. He's never gone anywhere near that number before. So he's set to regress quite a bit, and I do also see him as the third line center this year. And the third line is not nearly as good because they lost David Perron, so the depth on the team's a little bit worse. So I see him playing with Logan Thomas and Barbashev. It's just not quite as good of an outlook for Schenn this year, which is why personally I won't be drafting, especially at the ADP that he's currently being drafted at. It's really high. Justin Faulk, though, is someone that I really do like for fantasy this year. Last year he ended up as the 84th best fantasy player in terms of fantasy points per game. And yeah, his shooting percentage was a little bit high, so he will regress a little bit, but I still expect him to have a very strong year, and he puts up some really solid peripherals, so he's someone that I definitely do like around his current ADP. Next on the list is Robert Thomas, who finished the 105th best fantasy player in terms of fantasy points per game. Was definitely a big surprise last year for a breakout year. Scored 77 points in 72 games. And at this ADP, you might be thinking, are you high? Why are you not super high on drafting this guy? Well, the thing is with Robert Thomas, he doesn't really put up much for peripherals. Also, that shooting percentage is bound to go down a little bit as well. 17% is not really sustainable. Robert Thomas might be a point per game this year. But guys, if he's not putting up any peripherals for you, that's not that helpful in fantasy. Unless you're in a pure points league, in which case he's an absolute steal at this range. Robert Thomas, he's going to be all right for you. And at this range, he's not the worst pick in the world, but he's really not a guy who puts up any kind of peripherals, which is why I only think he's an okay draft pick at this range. Binnington, you've heard me in a few videos now. I'm pretty high on him this year. He doesn't have Husso to compete for the crease this year, and he's going to be the starter. Greiss is not that great of a backup. He's actually pretty all right, but Binnington will get the majority of the starts besides maybe a couple of back-to-backs. And I think he's going to have himself a nice bounce back year this year. He had a rough year last year, but he looked good in the playoffs, and I think he's going to be able to maintain that momentum going into the season this year and have himself a pretty good year. Next is Ryan O'Reilly, who finished the 165th best player in terms of fantasy points per game. Wasn't particularly great last year. His peripherals are okay, nothing too special, and the point output wasn't all that amazing last year. And this year he loses his line mate David Perron, and he is getting older and older by the year. He's not someone that I can recommend this year for fantasy, especially since he is a natural center, and there are just so many of them this year. It's just not worth drafting Ryan O'Reilly at his current ADP, which is actually higher than he ended up finishing last year. Next I have Colton Parayko, and he finished last year as the 228th best player in terms of fantasy points per game, which is, I mean, not particularly good, but if you're scraping the bottom of the barrel for a defenseman and you really need one, Colton Parayko is not the worst option. Should get about 35 points like he did last year, and is pretty good with the block shot, so that's not too bad. At this ADP, it's definitely early, but if he does fall significantly later and you're desperate, he's going to be okay, but he's definitely not someone who's going to do a whole lot better than that, and he's not someone that I'm super excited about drafting. Next is Ivan Barbashev, who also had a nice breakout season last year with 60 points in 81 games, which is fantastic. 26 goals, really, really good, but he shot the puck at 23.4%, which is absurdly high. That's definitely going to go down. I see him being a third liner with Schenn and Logan Thomas, which is not the best line in the world. And I just don't see him being able to match what he did last year, which is why this year I'm not going to be drafting Ivan Barbashev. And last we have Brayden Saad, who played for the most part last year on a line with Perron and O'Reilly. He was okay, finished as the 219th best fantasy player in terms of fantasy points per game, which is all right. He's a fringe roster player, though. He's not really worth drafting outside the absolute deepest leagues. And in other leagues, he's someone that you can stream in weeks that St. Louis has a more favorable schedule. And that's about it. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. Please leave a like, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and if you do want to take your support to the next level, the link to my Patreon is down below. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tip.